I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
That were carried out and obviously connected then, therefore, to the 4 others. Right now, law enforcement sources are saying they are almost 99% certain, is what I'm being told, that Osama bin Laden is behind this. And in addition, obviously, to the cell phone calls, which is much more hard evidence compared to other things that they were getting earlier, they are still looking at all the warning signs. This is the only man who had the financial backing. This is the only man who had the infrastructure for the World Wide Web, the tentacles really all over the world to be able to carry out this. And they also say it would have taken at least many months to plan this type of thing. And of course, they're trying to find out right now, was it somebody on the inside in terms of the airports getting in, who was able to get in this close? Were they all on the manifest? Were some of them able to just sneak in? Some of these things, of course.
At this point.
Okay, how is it and why is it that Fox News has better intelligence than all of our intelligence community combined? They're reporting Osama bin Laden pulled off 9/11 within hours of the attack? That is, unless Fox News' function is to instill a myth, to seal it in our minds that bin Laden pulled it off within hours of the attacks. How and why did this building fall? This is World Trade Center 7, a 47-story skyscraper that collapsed in 6.5 seconds on the afternoon of 9/11/01. How is it and why is it that this building's collapse never makes it into the 9/11 Commission report? I mean, it was only the regional headquarters for the FBI, the IRS, the Security and Exchange Commission, where they were keeping 400 case files related to numerous Wall Street swindles equaling billions of dollars. I mean, it's ridiculous. And they don't even mention it in the 9/11 Commission? I mean, it's just a common sense observation.
Pentagon, the day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America.
It is hard to conceive, but 3 days ago, both World Trade Towers rose 1,362 feet into the sky. Visit those same towers today. At their tallest point, they rise maybe 100 feet above the street. And while it's true there are 6 floors below street level, now filled with debris, engineers at the firm that built the building's best guess to account for the missing 1,200 feet of material from each tower is that large portions simply vaporized into the dust that rained down on New Yorkers immediately after the collapse. It was that powerful.
Get out of here!
We're talking here about 43,600 windows, 600,000 square feet of glass, 200,000 tons of structural steel, 5 million square feet of gypsum, 6 acres of marble, and 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, turned in good part into a cloud, says environmental medical doctor Stephen Levin.
I was astonished at the degree to which solid materials were turned into
pulverized dust as a consequence of that building collapse. I think it was striking.
The Environmental Protection Agency has been sampling the dust, and one specialist told ABC they believe the clouds that appeared immediately after the collapse were mostly gypsum dust from drywall, cement dust, and plaster, which can cause problems.
Cement dust is an irritant. Fine glass powder is also an irritating material.
The EPA did find spotty levels of asbestos. A sample on a police car turned out dangerous. Another sample a couple of blocks away, not dangerous. But most interesting, in the mix, they are looking, they think, at specks of steel that used to be beams and elevators, marble from the lobby floor and facings. So what were once the strongest architectural elements in the two towers were pulverized, large portions turned into clouds like this one. Still, there is this mystery. If some of the hardest materials were vaporized, how to account for the presence everywhere of paper, fully intact letters, business forms, stationery. Paper is so fragile and combustible, and yet somehow, maybe because we have so much of it, it was everywhere. Robert Krulwich, ABC News, New York.
Ground Zero itself. Now let us turn to...
A powerful blast produces what is called a shock wave. Explosions generate extremely high compressional waves that exceed the limits of surrounding air and space, creating a violent force.
One of my colleagues who is right in the middle of the collapse of those buildings is CNBC's Ron Insana, who went down with a cameraman hoping to get close to the World Trade Center, and then it began to come down. The first one. Ron, take us through what you experienced.
Well, Tom, much of the area had been, in fact, cordoned off, and the cameraman from MSNBC and I were trying to get across to the west side of the World Trade Center in order to hook up with the rest of the NBC crews that we knew were there. As we were moving towards the building, we saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion. We turned and immediately...
You heard the building collapse, right, Mr. Insana?
We saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
Now surely, Mr. Insana, you realize your journalistic integrity is at stake here. Now you heard the building collapse, right? You heard the noise associated with collapse, right?
As we were moving towards the building, we saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion. We turned and immediately ran for cover in the other direction as debris began to rain down.
Okay, Mr. Insana. So you say you saw the top of the World Trade Center blow out, and you heard the noises associated with an implosion. Well, what else did you see?
Absolutely. Much like the images that were created for the movie Independence Day, when New York was exploding, the corridors of Lower Manhattan are so narrow and channel so much wind, even just on a plain windy day, that this material blew through in a way that was really unimaginable. It was truly frightening.
Thank you for your statements, Mr. Insana, and I, for one, appreciate your honesty, candor, and patriotism for bringing this information about 9/11 to light. Thank you so much.
The images that were created for the movie Independence Day, when New York was exploding, when New York was exploding, when New York was exploding, when New York was exploding.
I think the worst thing that we could do as Americans is pretend like this doesn't happen. There are millions of Americans that believe that 9/11 was an inside job. All we need do to allow this endless war on terror or global empire or resources or whatever it is they want is to remain complacent. This lie of 9/11 is all they have to justify all our foreign policy. All we need to do to allow them to turn this into a fascist state, reminiscent thereof of Nazi Germany, is nothing. Our complacency is our enemy.